Hello, listeners out there in the YouTube world or in the internet world. We are here for another topic that comes to us a lot. And this is the topic about politics in business. People really sort of struggle with politics in business. So we want to talk about it. We want to see what we can do, what politics is, how it comes to it, and how we can create a collaborative team environment without the politics. How about that?
Well, I think it's certainly a very common factor that people are facing. But let's define what we mean by politics, office politics, playing one off against the other, going round behind your colleague's back, um, whispering to the boss, um, finding ways to actually trip your colleagues up or them tripping you up. Of course, obviously the reverse am I on the right track here, Jack?
Oh God, yeah, you have to stop because I'm getting very depressed. It's like, gee, that's awful. Who wants
Mm.
to go through that?
Well, often it's
Yeah.
jealousy. Often it's jealousy. Or they, yeah, I mean, I I hate to go straight off into one of my stories, but anyway, here we go. Um, when I run this company and I took over and I turned um, non-conformance reports into QA statements because non-conformance reports were being used politically, which is to
What do you
say
mean by non-conformance
for a
report?
quality report.
Oh, right,
A product moves from section A to section B. Section
right.
B writes a non-conformance report because they want to cause trouble for section A. And so it becomes a game of catch me out.
Oh,
So, but
really? It's awful.
yeah, well, it happens. So by moving that to quality assurance statements and taking the emotion out of it, it means nothing. So non-conformance is a fairly strong phrase, but a quality assurance statement is fairly bland. It's just a statement of what is. And so as a leader, that was a move that basically took that weapon away. Because what I
Right.
said is I want to change it from non-conformance reports to quality assurance statements, and I want more of them, not less. I want more because in a quality assurance statement, you can say, hey, this is what we could do to improve the quality. So I moved the team's mind from a negative of, oh, well, I can
Mhm.
use this because they knew how it would be received then. Like obviously keep putting negative reports up that are baseless. Well, they're going to get a wee talk with John, which is not a comfortable experience if you're doing that sort of thing. Um, okay, what can we do to make things better?
And
So
and
most of these things, sorry,
how did the team react to this?
they were very slow to catch on to it initially because it was like, oh, you want more? And I used to use devices like I would change the scale on the two charts between, uh, production problems and production ideas. So the production ideas um, chart would be going up quite markedly, and the production problems would be relatively lower because I changed the scale of the chart. Now you can say, well, that's deceitful, John. Well, maybe, but in fact, what I'm trying to encourage and move 70 odd people together as a team to buy it. I want them to see, listen, we're getting somewhere. There is some progress, right? So it took a long time. It took a long time. But the idea, what I'm getting at here is, and it doesn't matter what team you're leading, all right? If you're leading them and you're providing them with a good idea, something to focus on, and you're providing them with the information that they need, and you're opening up communication so as that they can get the information about whatever they need to know. I mean, I know of a company here in Brisbane now right now that have got to the point with trust with their staff where they're actually sharing and explaining their open books. They're telling them how much money they are making.
Mm. Yeah.
That's a remarkable degree of trust, but they brought everybody into the camp. Everybody's playing on the same page. And you've got to have stomped out office politics or factory politics or whatever it is in order to get to that point. Everybody's got to be on the same team.
Yeah, and I think the I mean that was very smart to change or reframe, the quality the quality statements, or reframe it to quality statements. But then there's also, and that's, that's a really good step. But then there's also the reason, why teams would resort to politics,
Yeah.
and really looking at that, and kind of getting to the bottom why there is office politics. And I find it's often a layered problem. Um,
Mhm.
I remember when I was taking on a new job, you start with a new job and you start with a blank slate. And then there is a lot of history in companies. So when you're new, you don't have that history. And I think, why is this happening? Why is this team not talking to this team? And I find that a lot of is history, and then we build also certain perception and stories in our brain, and that we think, well, this is all just office politics. But I found, when I then actually went to this leader and spoke to them, it was a whole different story. So I think, sometimes people come to me and they think, oh, there's this office politics, what am I going to do? And it may or may not be true, or it may be partially true, but it also builds up in the brain as, this story, and then everyone
Mm.
gets entangled in a story, and then you come to the bottom of the story and poof, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
story. It's like poof.
But everything's a story, isn't it, Jack? I mean, this is where we get ourselves confused, right? I mean, ultimately, the question is, are we writing our own story or are we believing somebody else's story? Are we the
Yeah,
lead player in our story or are we a bit player in somebody else's story? That's the
that's
choice.
right.
And if you just accept whatever story is sent your way about what is, particularly if you're a new employee and you just buy into it, well, it's monkeys on the stairs. I don't know if you've heard about that, but there was an experiment where they put bananas at the top of these steps, caged monkeys, 10 monkeys in a cage. Bananas would go, the monkeys would go up and get the bananas off the top of the steps, right? Then they decided to hose the monkeys when they went up the stairs and see if they could distract them from getting the banana. And sure as eggs, they were able to stop the monkeys. So then what they do, no monkeys would go up and get the bananas because they knew they were going to get hosed. So then what they did is they started swapping the monkeys out. And so the new monkey didn't know about the hose, but as soon as he goes to go up the stairs, the other monkeys attack him because they know he's going to get hosed. So they keep swapping the monkeys out, and eventually you've got 10 monkeys in the cage who attack each other because that's
Because
what you do. You attack monkeys that go up the stairs. They've forgotten the original story, the original reason, and this is we humans. We do this all the time. We leave procedures in place that supposedly are there for a reason, and stories in place that are there because. And then, as you said, when you go and investigate, you go, why are the monkeys attacking each other when they go up the stairs? There is no blimmin' reason for it. And that's
yeah, that's a very
find
that's
out
a
what the
very
truth is, you
it's a
know?
very good example. And it also comes back to that we're human beings, we are social creatures, and we want to fit in. And
Yeah.
if we are in some form rejected, whether we make it up or not, our survival instincts are triggered. And for us to then actually go and communicate in person with another person to address this issue, this is not something that, we have to overcome a lot of sort of survival mechanisms to actually go there and talk to the person. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the times, this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
The be courageous enough and talk to the person and ask a few questions. And sometimes, or often, maybe more often than what you think, you find out they were completely oblivious. Maybe, they weren't part of it. Maybe that's not how they meant it. And you resolve this story that's going to boomerang like a cauliflower.
Mm. Yeah, look, that's absolutely right. And that requires the way of being of vulnerability, having a healthy relationship with vulnerability. Because as Brené Brown says, unless you're vulnerable, there's no need for courage, right? Because hey, you've got the power, you're strong, you're in a tank. No need to be courage if you're going through the infantry. But if you're in the infantry and you're attacking a tank, that's a different matter.
But we always are vulnerable, just to say it. It depends
Oh,
what
we
our
are. That's the
relationship
reality. That's just the
That's
reality.
reality.
But
Anything
then to
can
the
happen to us at any time.
But if you're in a situation and you need to go from one, say you're one department head and you're trying to work out what's the you're the new person, you're trying to work out why the heck there's this tension between these two departments. So you go over and see the other department. You come the innocent because you're the first you're the new person on the boat. You go in and say, hey, brief me on this. What's the story? What's going on? You know? Um, and be prepared to listen and be open. And often, I will say often, if you allow someone to talk through with you what they are feeling and where the tensions are because they are being heard, they will talk themselves all the way through to a solution. And they will go, oh yeah, no, that's probably not relevant anymore, is it? And you go, oh, okay, way you go. They've solved their own problem because you listen to them. And often that's the greatest gift we can give to another human is just listen. And that's different from hearing because hearing is just your eardrums wobbling around. Listening is interpreting and seriously focusing on what the other person has to say. But when you do that, they can be really empowering and knocking out those sorts of office politics issues.
Yeah, and the thing is, what you also may find out that the other person is suffering from the similar phenomena. They think, oh my
Absolutely.
God, I'm in this office politics. So everyone thinks,
Mm.
oh, I'm in this office politics.
Mm.
And 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 basically we were, then creating teams that are disempowered and are just falling to some office politics that may not even exist to such a degree,
Mm.
or maybe even not exist in some instances at all, where the other person is completely oblivious and thinks, well, that's not never what I meant. But I mean, there can be very negative forces in a team that cause gossip and politics. And as a leader, you need to address it and kind of have the discernment to see if there is someone in a team that is causing negativity, to talk to them about it and manage it. And often also when that is the case, that there is one person that is spreading negativity or that's trying to drag people into gossip, the rest of the team notices it and they suffer from it.
Mm.
And I think it is important because we are so social creatures that we develop this culture within a team that we have open and straightforward communication that's focused on the problem, not the personality. And that's something that needs to be fostered. But once that's there, the working climate becomes so much easier, and also communication is so much more straightforward, and things accelerate rather than get stuck in these stories.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I totally agree with you. When you have that force for negativity around, it needs to be addressed. And quite often you'll find it comes from fear. So
Yeah,
you pull George into the office and say, George, I hear you have some real concerns about how we're going and what's going to happen here. Would you like to share with me what your concerns are? Well, they really are. And let's dig down, because this um, fight and flight reaction going on here. That oh, I'm afraid. I want everybody else to be afraid. So if I'm not comfortable if I'm the only one afraid. Am I the only one understanding that there's a lion out there? No. You know that. You know, hey George, I know there's a lion. By the way, there's a tiger and a cheetah and a few other things out there as well. And everybody's after us, and our competition is our competition. But that's no reason to be fearful, and it's actually very unhelpful to think in that way, because it clogs up your thinking. Just when you need to be thinking like Einstein, your fight and flight reaction has you thinking like a rhesus monkey.
yeah,
So that's not useful.
that's right. And I think, you know, by not having the courage to talk to a person, whether it's a peer or whether you are the leader or whether you are a team member, you need to talk to your manager. We're just giving away our power. We're just giving away our empowerment, our joyful life, because then we're at the suffering end. And I find that, as I said earlier, in most communications, it turns out to not be as bad as you think. And the listeners probably also like to get some tips, how am I going to do this, or maybe some strategic tips. And I would also say, well, communication is important, but also, pick your timing, and maybe not start with the most fearful uh, person. Maybe start small, take small steps, until you get to the point where you can actually face a person that may really be intimidating to you. So maybe not start with that person. And you need to practice as a leader, you need to practice to have this open communication. And one aspect also that keeps us in the story is that we have these stories around how a communication will go. You don't know
Mm.
how it will go. If you come into the conversation with this a clean slate, and you don't make the other person wrong, but you have your boundaries and you want to understand what's going on. People are dismantled when someone is really authentic. I've noticed this all the time.
Here, here.
When I'm authentic, I'm not coming from making them wrong. I just want to understand what's going on. And there's no sort of negativity. There's no story in my head. I just let it all go. There's no attachment, to the personality or the person. And I just want to know what's actually going on. And when you come with that level of authenticity to another person, unless they're completely a disturbed person, they cannot else but be authentic as well. And
Mm.
I've seen that a lot, a lot.
Yeah. Yes, because you'll bear your soul, they'll bear theirs. And I mean, you need to lead the way. That's how you lead, by being authentic yourself. And I also want to remind listeners, we covered this in an earlier podcast, um, to set up the difficult conversation, to actually
Yeah,
ask permission to have a difficult conversation. And this works with your boss and it works with your colleagues. I have a difficult subject for me to talk to about with you. Is this a good time? And if they say yes, then you've been granted permission to talk about a difficult subject, to put it out there and be authentic. If they say, well, this is not a good time, how about we schedule another time? So you schedule another time and you allow them. Again, they're coming in forewarned, forearmed that this is, in your view at least, a difficult conversation. Now, I must say, to go to Jacqueline's point, the number of times when I've actually used that tool, get into the conversation, the person looks at me and says, "Well, what's difficult about that?" Like, what? But because you're being sensitive, and there's nothing wrong with being too sensitive when somebody doesn't need it, but there is something really problematic when you're not sensitive enough and the person needs it.
Yeah.
So, it's better to ask that permission, set the discussion up properly, but do have the discussion because how does office politics and the grapevine works? It works on misinformation, and nothing kills misinformation like access to genuine information. And that's again
Yes.
comes down to why is communication important? Why does it regular meetings, staff meetings? I was in a business the other day, and they've decided it was a family business. They decided to stop having business meetings because the brothers kept fighting, which is bizarre because they they're not going anywhere until they sort that out. Because that you must have that level of communication. So yeah,
And
but work, be clever about it. Make people
that's right. Be a
expectation.
bit, have some strategies around it, find a good time. And the thing is also these so-called office politics, which, um, can have detrimental impacts. They can have impacts on the joy that someone experiences at work. It can really dim it. One of my clients was about to leave the company because of that, um, and
Yes.
um, and we, that's a huge impact. But he liked working for the company, so I said, so why don't you talk to your boss about it, the CEO of the company? Just talk to him about it, and we managed this. And the thing is, it just turned around 180 degrees. You never
Mm,
know, and he's still
mm,
working for this company. That's the impact. Or you can have, as a team leader or business owner, you can have one person in your business that drags the whole team down, and it impacts on their productivity. They don't really like to come to work anymore. They try to avoid this person, and as a business owner, you gotta address it. It also means that the team needs to learn to speak up as well, and not being dragged down by a person who is negative and wants to gossip and that sort of thing. But the impact is incredible.
well, especially if people start not talking, oh, that I said that and it was used against me, that or I don't feel that I can speak up freely. These are issues, and then talent starts leaving. And look, there's no truest saying, in my humble opinion, with business and have staff and employees, it's better to fix the problem than replace the problem. At least with the employee that you've got, you know what the problem is. The next employee you get, blank slate. You can do all the references you like, but at the end of the day, you really don't know. It,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
best guess, even if you use profiling, like, to make sure the fit's as good as possible. And then in a market like we have now, there's no guarantee you'll get those particular skills. So, this and office politics is a really nasty negative um, phenomenon,
Good. Yeah,
and it needs to be rooted out.
it is. And you also sort of pointed out a really good point, as in it is better to keep a person. And often what I noticed is there can be a certain dismissiveness about, oh yeah, they're not really working, they're not, and let's get rid of them in quotations, rather than actually having a conversation first to find out maybe they're going through some hardship, maybe there's something that can be managed. And on the other side, I noticed that people who are actually very negative by default, or they just don't want to work there, but they're hanging in there and they're just not following the rules, that's been tolerated. There's a sort of this discrepancy of, someone who could become, come back into the collaborative work mindset, who's just going through some, maybe private challenges, or have some other anxieties and fears around their work. There's no communication or not enough. And the other one who is just, really going on a free ride and is not interested in working there, is not interested in following the process, they will be dragged along. So there's a huge,
Well,
discrepancy.
when you go look at the Gallup figures in terms of, engaged workers versus disengaged workers, we're talking like, I think the number is around 20% of workers are actually engaged. Another 11% actively leaving and something like 70% passively leaving. So the importance of leadership in the engagement process is absolutely massive. And when I think about this issue of office politics, Jacqueline, I think, a boss who is out there is assertive, fair, and clean with their relationships with each and every in employee. And so bosses have to think about what they say and how they say it and when they say it. You can't just walk out and waggle your tongue, and you might be thinking about a particular problem, a particular area, but you've got to be careful what you do with that information,
Mm,
because you can set
mm,
these tongues alight. As soon
yes,
as somebody feels they have your confidence, and then, oh, well, you've told them something that nobody else knows. Now they are empowered, and you've done it. You've lit the fire yourself. So, I do hold CEOs and or general managers, whoever's at the top, owners, they are responsible for the tone in this
yeah,
their company. Like that's this little family business I was talking about the other day. Dad has to get his son sorted. And to do that, he has
yeah,
to get himself sorted and become an assertive leader, not
yeah.
aggressive, but assertive and knowledgeable, and say, hey, you two, knock it off. That ain't is not going to get us where we need to be. Get back in line. And
And
certainly,
and
sorry.
actually also resolve the dispute, or make sure that they resolve it. You don't have to resolve it with them.
Mm.
As leaders of business, you can expect that people who have an issue, that you go and sort out your issue amongst yourself, and then you come to me when you
Or you
want.
may provide resources for it. You
Yeah,
may say, okay,
if
you
they
two
need it.
in a room with a professional person for mediation is sorted out. And again, as a trained mediator, I know that once people get heard, and isn't it interesting? Once they get heard and they feel that the other person really understands their position, one or two things happens. Either the person who they have the dispute with will go, oh, now I understand what the problem was, or the person that is doing the talking, as I said before, talks themselves around to a resolution and goes, oh, I was just given the space to work it out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
again, it's down to companies if they want to keep their people engaged, if they want to keep their talent on board. Leadership matters.
It it
Leadership
it
through influence matters.
it does, and I think it's very important to be heard. That's a really important point. And sometimes we're not patient enough to listen. But once a person is fully heard and they have the experience, I'm actually fully heard, that often resolves a lot by itself. And the other point I also wanted to pick up on is that there is often, or I find it um, in my workshops also, there's often this perception that if I want to express myself, I need to feel good. It needs to be the perfect environment so I can express myself.
Yes, this is a
And
good point.
that's not the thing is, um, I'm not saying you should put up with bullying behavior and this sort of thing. But even if you are confronted with bullying behavior, you as a leader need to speak up and say that's not working. Now, that doesn't mean that it feels good in the moment when you say it. And that's the general understanding. Oh, if I'm a confident leader, if I'm influential, if I'm self-expressed, it just comes. No, self-expression also comes out when you need courage to speak up.
Mm,
And that's often in today's sort of modern age a little bit misunderstood.
mm,
That if I'm confident, I need to feel good, or I would be feeling good all the time. No, you don't. You're just confident to manage a certain situation. And
mm,
and the thing is, but once you practice this and you do speak up when it's not comfortable, then you have expressed yourself, even if the other person is not responding in a way that you would like it to be, you still have expressed yourself. And you have practiced, you know, your courage to speak up in situations where it's just not comfortable. But you got to
yeah.
do it as a leader.
I think we've mined this topic as far as we
Oh,
can go.
we
Well,
have
certainly
mined this
before
topic.
we
Yeah.
bore people.
Yeah, no, there's I think we've pulled out a lot of information, uh, and communication is king or queen, and it doesn't always feel good, and that's part of being a leader and being self-expressed. It doesn't always feel good, but communication, that's probably the main thing. Find out what's actually going on rather than submitting to a story that maybe
Yeah,
blossomed like a cauliflower and started that small.
yeah. I agree, Jack. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening
Yeah.
to us, and we'll see
Okay,
you all
see you
next week.
next time.